I'll request now Dr. Bharat sir to introduce our next speaker.
Yeah, our next talk is on should GLP-1 receptor antagonist or insulin be the first injectable? And for that talk, we have very eminent speaker, Dr. B.M. Makkar. He is head of Dr. Makkar's Diabetes and Obesity Center. He is diabetologist and bariatric physician. He is also a course director of Cleveland Clinic Advanced Certificate Course in Diabetes in India. He has been honorary secretary of Research Society for the Study of Diabetes in India. So for this talk, over to Dr. Makkar.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. At the outset, I would like to thank Team Swasthikon and Dr. Patel for giving me this great opportunity. As you are aware, I am going to be speaking on should GLP-1 RA be the first injectable or should it be insulin? I don't have any disclosures for this presentation. As you are aware, that once we are talking about type 1 insulin, type 1 diabetes, insulin is the only choice, and there is no confusion whether we are going to use injectable or oral because that's the only choice. When we are talking about type 2 diabetes, there is usually a consensus that we should be starting with lifestyle intervention and metformin, and if the person is not achieving glucose targets, then we add another oral agent usually, or in certain cases, we have the choice of adding GLP-1 receptor agonist, which is injectable, or insulin also. And if the patient is not able to achieve targets with metformin and another oral agent, or maybe two oral agents, then the usual choice is to move on to injectables. Now, earlier this choice was limited to insulin, but during last decade, we have seen more and more use of GLP-1 receptor agonists, and there are a lot of advantages also associated with GLP-1 receptor agonists, and that is why this question has come up: should we add GLP-1 receptor agonist first or insulin first? Now we know that type 2 diabetes is characterized by two core defects. One is beta cell dysfunction and other is insulin resistance. And we know that beta cell dysfunction is progressive, leading to progressive decline of insulin secretion. But 2008 DeFronzo's presentation showing that there are multiple mechanisms contributing to development of hyperglycemia actually made a paradigm shift in the thinking process about pathophysiology of diabetes, and we now know that we have multiple pathways for intervention. Now if you look carefully, that out of the 8 pathways suggested by DeFronzo, actually 7 of the pathways act through either insulin axis, either insulin secretion or insulin resistance, and they act through the insulin axis, except for the renal mechanism, which is independent of insulin axis. Now, if we give insulin to a patient, irrespective of whether there is decreased insulin secretion or increased glucagon secretion, insulin actually can take care of everything because there is deficiency of insulin, and by giving exogenous insulin, we can increase peripheral glucose uptake, we can decrease hepatic glucose uptake, we can suppress glucagon, we can actually, insulin also regulates food intake by CNS effect, and also preserves beta cell function and improves beta cell function by reducing glucotoxicity. Also, it suppresses lipolysis and increases lipogenesis. Now, we know GLP-1 receptor agonists act by increasing insulin secretion from beta cell through a glucose-dependent mechanism. They also suppress glucagon secretion from alpha cell, thereby suppressing hepatic glucose output. Also, they also have central effect whereby they promote satiety and reduce appetite, and also slow gastric emptying, thereby reducing weight. So if you look at the effects of GLP-1 receptor agonists, they increase insulin secretion by improving beta cell function. They suppress glucagon secretion by suppressing alpha cell function, and also suppress glucose food intake by central mechanism, thereby causing reduction in glucose levels and also reduction in weight. Now, important thing to see here is that they act by increasing insulin, and they are responsible for almost 60% of insulin secretion. So once the beta cell dysfunction is advanced and there is a significant decrease in insulin secretion, their efficacy becomes very, very reduced or low. Now we know that insulin resistance is already established at diagnosis, but the insulin deficiency, that is loss of islet cell function, beta cell function, is progressive, and this leads to progressive decline of insulin secretion, necessitating intensification of therapy. And because of this progressive decline of insulin, there is progressive failure of whatever therapy we are using, and we need to keep on adding second agent, third agent, and finally we end up with insulin. So all the agents that we use, whether it is sulfonylureas, glinides, or DPP4 inhibitors, or SGLT or GLP-1 receptor agonists, they all use endogenous insulin. And if it is already significantly low, the efficacy of these agents is compromised, except for SGLT2 inhibitors, which act independent of insulin axis. Now, let us look at the recommendations from ADA, which have been published uh, a week back only. And it says that all patients with type 2 diabetes, metformin is the preferred initial pharmacological agent for treatment of type 2 diabetes. However, some patients will need early introduction of insulin, and it should be considered when there is evidence of ongoing catabolism, if there is symptoms of severe hyperglycemia, or when the A1C level is more than 10% or the glucose level is more than 300. Now, as we treat type 2 diabetes patients, and as I've already shown you that there is a progressive decline of beta cell function, so type 2 diabetes being a progressive disease, long-term control and maintenance of glycemic targets with monotherapy is usually not possible, and there is need for intensification therapy or addition of more agents. So the current recommendations are that we initiate with lifestyle intervention metformin and have stepwise add-on to metformin if the glycemic controls are not achieved, which allows a clearer assessment of the positive and negative effects of new drugs and reduces the patient risk and expense also. Now, choice of second add-on agent to metformin is based on clinical characteristics of the patient, presence of the established atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease or risk factors for ASCVD, presence or absence of heart failure, CKD, or other comorbidities, risks associated with specific drug adverse effects, cost of the drug, tolerability, and of course the patient preferences. Now, the current recommendation is that we should adopt a patient-centered approach. However, if patient has a already established atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease or high risk for the same, has established kidney disease or heart failure, a SGLT2 inhibitor or a GLP-1 receptor agonist with demonstrated CV disease benefit and renal benefit is recommended as part of glucose lowering regime, independent of the A1C level and other considerations which are patient specific factors. However, if there is no if there is no ASCVD or there is no renal disease, then there is little evidence to support one combination over other, and the comparative data suggests that each new class of non-insulin agents added to metformin gives you a A1C reduction in the range of 0.7 to 1%. And if the A1C target is not achieved with metformin alone, after 3 months, any of the 6 options can be added, which is sulfonylurea, glitazone, DPP4 inhibitors, SGLT2 inhibitor, GLP-1 receptor agonist, or basal insulin. And choice of agent is based on drug-specific effects and, of course, the patient factors. Now, once it comes to adding injectable, which injectable should be used first, whether it is GLP-1 receptor agonist or the insulin. Now, this is the table from current ADA guidelines, which gives you a comparative plus minus of all the agents. And if we compare GLP-1 receptor agonist with insulin, now insulin has the highest A1C lowering efficacy, and GLP-1 receptor agonists, they of course have high efficacy, but they may not be effective if the beta cell function is dysfunction is advanced, the and endogenous insulin capacity is decreased markedly. However, insulin also has the drawback of having higher risk of or highest risk of inducing hypoglycemia. GLP-1 receptor agonists do not cause hypoglycemia. They have the advantage of associated weight loss, while insulin leads to some weight gain. They have severe outcome data showing that they have severe outcome benefits, where insulin is neutral, and insulin is neutral as far as the heart failure benefit is also concerned. The cost of GLP-1 receptor agonist is very high compared to insulin, and it is more relevant in Indian setting. They are used mostly available as injectable currently in India. We don't have the oral semaglutide, which is launched in now Western countries. Uh, GLP-1 receptor agonists, they also have proven renal benefits where insulin is neutral. They also have the advantage of having a fixed dose while insulin needs to be titrated. However, they have some certain black box warnings, particularly liraglutide, albiglutide, and exenatide, and semaglutide, as far as the risk of thyroid C-cell tumor is concerned. Though it is shown only in the animal studies, insulin doesn't have those kind of black box warnings, and it is approved for all age categories, all uh, patients with type 2, type 1 diabetes, and insulin is the only choice of drug in pregnancy also. Now, current recommendation is that in patients with type 2 diabetes, a GLP-1 receptor agonist should be preferred to insulin when possible. And this is the algorithm given in the current guideline, that once you are starting with the injectable therapy, after metformin and other oral agents are not able to achieve target, consider a GLP-1 receptor agonist in most of the patients prior to insulin, except in situations where GLP-1 receptor is not affordable or has side effects like severe nausea and patient is not willing to take it, or if the patient is already on GLP-1 RA, then you add the basal insulin. If after adding GLP-1 receptor agonists, A1C is still above target, you have to intensify with basal insulin and follow up with intensification with basal insulin going on to basal bolus regime if the patient is still not on target. Now, if the patient has been added basal insulin and still not achieving target, now you have to see whether the patient has earlier been added a GLP-1 receptor agonist or no. If it is not there already in the regime, then add GLP-1 receptor agonist. If both GLP-1 RA and basal insulin are already on board, then you have to intensify with basal bolus regime and go on to further intensification of therapy. We also have RSSDI ESI clinical practice recommendation published earlier this year for management of type 2 diabetes, where we have specific chapter on the treatment of diabetes, and there is a full chapter on injectables. Now, RSSDI ESI recommendation recommends a patient-centric approach referred as ABCDEFG, which should be adopted for diabetes management for most type 2 diabetes patients. And choice of anti-diabetic agent should take into account patient's general health status and associated medical disorders. For all type 2 diabetes patients, first in therapy recommended should be metformin in addition to lifestyle interventions, unless contraindicated or not tolerated by the patient. And this is a simplified, wheel which has been designed to go through to provide a easy reference for initiating and modifying therapy. Now, the important thing to note here is that hierarchy of therapy is depicted in clockwise manner in this wheel, and GLP-1 receptor agonist must be used based on costs. Any drug can be used in the green zone for any category of patients. And if you see A, B, C, D, E, F, G, so A is for age, B for BMI, and so on. So these are important factors that need to be considered for initiating therapy in any patient. So GLP-1 receptor agonists in this wheel also, if you will see, are recommended in preference to insulin, except for two conditions. One, where F means financial constraints are there, and the second category is patients with CKD, where if they are advanced, CKD, there may be a concern relating to nausea and decreased intake of food in these patients, and GLP may not be the appropriate agent. So otherwise, all categories GLP-1 receptor agonists are preferred agents over insulin. Now, still there are conditions where insulin needs to be considered as first-line injectable, especially if there is evidence of ongoing catabolism, there are symptoms of severe hyperglycemia, A1C is more than 10%, or glucose is more than 300, or there is a possibility of type 1 diabetes in the patient, which has to be ruled out first. Now, other situations where insulin needs to be preferred is where GLP-1 receptor agonists are not tolerated or are not effective, and where the cost is an important consideration. Rest of the situations, now GLP-1 receptor agonists are recommended as preferred drug over insulin, but these specific conditions, insulin needs to be preferred still. With this, I come to end of my presentation. Insulin also has some of the advantages that it restores beta cell function, provides long-term near normal glycemic control, reduces microvascular complications, and protects end organ damage, but has the challenges of weight gain, hypoglycemia, and of course need for injection is there with both the therapies. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Makar sir, for such an amazing session.